This is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous, good-looking friends. We're picking right back up from part 1, diving deeper into the lawsuit involving Imran Ahmed, the arrogant CEO of Center for Countering Digital Hate, otherwise known as CCDH. If you haven't watched that video that I did yesterday, I highly recommend starting there. It will give you the full context of the serious revelations I'm about to share regarding this organization, its true origins, and Harry and Meghan's involvement. All right, let's get straight into this. In yesterday's video, we explored one of CCDH's founding directors, Lord Johnny Oates, and his connections directly with James Holt. Links that perfectly explain the reputation warfare tactics employed and endorsed by Prince Harry onto innocent people, like you and me. The whistleblower CCDH documents provide all the proof needed. Phrases like kill Musk's Twitter appear alongside mentions of James Holt and Archwell's direct involvement and engagement. You can try to deny Harry and Meghan's ties to CCDH and these individuals from the very start, but as I've been saying all along, the evidence shows otherwise, and I've always maintained that this has been political at its core and was about the 2020 election. So let's talk about those political origins and what CCDH really is about, not what it's claiming to be for PR branding. This is Morgan McSweeney. This little shit is responsible for getting that disaster Starmer into the office. Him and Imran Ahmed met through their shared involvement in centrist Labour Party networks during the late 2010s, particularly in efforts to counter Jeremy Corbyn's leadership and associated propaganda media. Imran Ahmed's cozy ties with Morgan McSweeney traces to their grubby joint efforts in political sabotage against Corbyn, supporting media outlets funneled through AstroTurf campaigns like Stop Funding Fake News, which Ahmed ran like a personal vendetta while targeting left-wing sites to starve them of revenue.
A secretly funded operation that Starmer and his current chief of staff, Morgan McSweeney, were running. What they did is when Jeremy Corbyn was rising and was the head of the Labour Party, they came together and said, how are we going to undercut the support for Corbynism and elevate Starmer? Mm-hmm. And so they identified a lot of progressive media that had grown up around the kind of Corbynist rise and said, we need to undercut these folks. And so they created two organizations, and this is what he's able to report with these documents, and this is what hasn't been known before. They created an organization called Stop Funding Fake News.
Oh, right.
FN, and another one called the Center for Countering Digital Hate. And so they presented themselves as they're just grassroots Britons who are concerned about fake news and misinformation and disinformation out there. Not that they were funded by secret money from pro-Israel elements that were funneling it into the Keir Starmer political machine. That's what he can report. So this whole thing, this whole fake news scheme that they were running was not grassroots, just concerned Britons. It was the Keir Starmer machine aimed at destroying Jeremy Corbyn. So they went after a bunch of left-wing publications. They also went after, for balance and for fun, a bunch of populist right-wing news outlets as well, including Breitbart and The Federalist.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Davis, your testimony described how in the summer of 2020, Google attempted to demonetize The Federalist following your critiques of violent Black Lives Matter riots. It's documented that the Center for Countering Digital Hate, the CCDH, specifically worked to demonetize The Federalist for these critiques. Could you just describe what tactics specifically were employed to do that?
Yes, sir. Thank you for bringing that up. So I believe it was in July of 2020.
Started receiving emails from an NBC News reporter based out of the UK. I don't remember her name exactly. And they were almost taunting, asking for comment. Hey, Federalist, how does it feel knowing Google's is about to demonetize you for hate speech or something like that? I'm paraphrasing. And this was news to us. We hadn't broken any rules. We had gotten no notifications of breaking rules, that we had violated Google's terms and conditions or AdSense's or whatever. And so we started calling around to contacts at Google and learned that, oh yeah, you are about to be demonetized because of hate speech. Was what we were told. We had racist, violent hate speech, which was not true at all. And it was the CCDH who was working with this NBC News, I think it was called the verification unit at the time. They were working together and colluding with executives at Google, to this day, I don't know who, to come in and secretly demonetize us. And what I found most offensive about it was they were all in on it. They had news articles ready to be written, kind of crowing about how we got demonetized. We were able to fight back. We had a pretty robust response to that, and they ended up relenting. Largely, what was interesting was in that initial news article targeting us, they had cited that news article, how the media are lying to you about literally everything, including the riots. The NBC News ended up stealth editing that out, and they worked with Google to come up with a new rationale for demonetizing us, which was our comments were mean. We had an unmoderated comment section, so we ended up having to delete our comment section to avoid being demonetized by Google because a bunch of foreign connected government outfits decided that they didn't like what we were publishing.
McSweeney's so-called reputation for undercover press operations is just a fancy euphemism for his lifelong habit of slimy, fingerprint-free media manipulation as a labor fixer. His teams apparently took great pride in playing dirty tricks, leaking stories disguised as coming from concerned conservatives or neutral insiders, all to sow chaos without anyone tracing it back to labor. Pure unadulterated hypocrisy from people who preach about human rights and civil liberties online. Imran Ahmed lecturing the United States about democratic values and countering hate, while pioneering the exact censorship by proxy tactics he pretends to deplore when anyone else uses them. Now, switching over to the Stop Hate for Profit campaign, that was launched in mid-2020 as an organized advertiser boycott against Facebook, designed to leverage corporate spending to force changes in platform content policies rather than through democratic lawmaking or judicial review. At the heart of the campaign was a chorus of activist NGOs, including the ADL, the NAACP, Color of Change, you have Free Press, Common Sense, organizations that Harry and Meghan have funded. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle jumped into this movement not merely as concerned public figures, but as influential partners who helped amplify the pressure. In an op-ed tied to the campaign, Prince Harry wrote that social media companies have contributed to, stoked, and created the conditions for a crisis of hate, a crisis of health, and a crisis of truth, and urged business leaders to use their leverage, including their advertising dollars, to demand change. Harry explicitly framed paid advertising as a moral tool for enforcing social norms, a striking inversion of how free markets and free speech are normally understood, writing, "Every time you click, they learn more about you. Our information, private data, and unknown habits are traded on for advertising space and dollars. The price we're all paying is much higher than it appears." That message aligned with pressure from the Center for Countering Digital Hate, otherwise known as CCDH, which produced reports linking advertising revenue to the spread of hate or disinformation and helped coordinate advertiser support for the boycott. CCDH's role was not neutral research or legal analysis. Its work functioned as economic leverage, pressuring platforms to change policies through indirect financial coercion. In the background of all of this sits the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, otherwise known as ISD, where paid Archwell consultant Jory Craig is tied to. UK-based ISD plays a more structural role here. ISD doesn't run advertiser boycotts, but it provides the policy frameworks and risk models that define what counts as hate, extremism, misinformation, or harm. Definitions that feed directly into regulatory and legislative systems across Europe and the UK. ISD's Digital Policy Lab has advised policymakers and regulators on frameworks that inform both the EU's Digital Services Act and the UK's Online Safety Act, shaping how governments and platforms think about content risk and enforcement. Imran Ahmed's lawsuit against the United States government proudly boasts his involvement with the UK's Online Safety Bill as well as supporting the EU's Digital Services Act. During the miserable Biden years in December of 2021, the Democrats invited Imran Ahmed to Capitol Hill to hear his testimony on why they need to regulate our free speech.
The Center for Countering Digital Hate, CCDH, is a non-profit researching the dynamics of misinformation and hate on social media, how it undermines democracy, the rule of law, child safety, and our ability to deal with life-threatening crises such as COVID. So why is this happening? Why are we here? The ugly truth is, social media companies discovered prioritizing hate, misinformation, conflict, and anger is highly profitable. It keeps users addicted so they can serve them ads. CCDH's research has documented bad actors causing harm, but also bad platforms encouraging, amplifying, and profiting from that harm. The platforms have managed to successfully stop any credible action by deploying a well-worn playbook. 1, initially, deny there's a problem. 2, admit there's a problem, but deflect responsibility. 3, finally, acknowledge responsibility, but delay any action. Deny, deflect, delay. I can show you how that works in practice. On March the 24th, we released a report showing that up to 65% of anti-vax content circulating on Facebook and Twitter, 65%, originates with sites and accounts operated by just 12 anti-vaxxers, the disinformation dozen. This committee asked Mark Zuckerberg about the report in a hearing the next day on March the 25th. He promised to do something about it. He did not. 6 months later, after the Surgeon General and the President weighed in, again citing our report, Facebook responded, claiming our report had a faulty narrative. However, Facebook whistleblower Frances Haugen revealed that on the very same day we released our report, March the 24th, Facebook produced an internal study confirming that a tiny number of accounts were responsible for more than half of anti-vaccine content on their platform. So they were lying, while the American public was suffering under COVID and people were dying.
To your question, the term malinformation was coined to describe information that Facebook and Twitter and the other social media sites understood was true, but that the White House and other federal agencies wanted censored anyway for political reasons because it challenged official orthodoxies. I'll give you one example. I was included in a group called the Disinformation Dozen. And Facebook and others were asked to censor us, which they did. And by the way, my Heck Aaron post, it was taken down. My whole Instagram account with 900,000 people was taken down because of that. So they knew, Facebook knew that the Disinformation Dozen claim, and what they said was the Disinformation Dozen came from this very shady group called the Center for Preventing Digital Hate in England that is funded by dark money that should be looked into. They claim that 65% of the vaccine misinformation on the internet was generated by those 12 people. Facebook itself said that is impossible. That is false information. We know that not to be true. And yet, when the White House asked them to censor this Disinformation Dozen, including me, they did it anyway when they knew it to be untrue.
Just like Christopher Bouzy and his Fugazi reports, Imran Ahmed knew very well that the information in that report was not honest. Either Imran Ahmed was given faulty information as he regurgitated it in front of Congress, or he deliberately lied. I want you to go ahead and watch this again and pay close attention towards the end. Watch how Imran Ahmed stumbles as he starts to talk about these 12 who he's claiming is responsible for all of this disinformation about vaccines.
Circulating on Facebook and Twitter, 65%, originates with sites and accounts operated by just 12 anti-vaxxers. The disinformation dozen. This committee asked Mark Zuckerberg about the report in a hearing the next day on March the 25th. He promised to do something about it. He did not. 6 months later, after the Surgeon General and the President weighed in, again citing our report, Facebook responded, claiming our report had a faulty narrative. However, Facebook whistleblower Frances Haugen revealed that on the very same day we released our report, March the 24th, Facebook produced an internal study confirming that a tiny number of accounts were responsible for more than half of anti-vaccine content on their platform. So they were lying while the American public was suffering under COVID and people were dying.
Somebody's lying here, because what Imran is reading from, this so-called whistleblower, Francis, talking about some internal document, was reported by the Washington Post, but the Washington Post never shared what that internal document looked like. They just reported it. Now, how many of us trust the Washington Post? How many times do these outlets lie to us? This was a hit job and campaign that was running here to force people into getting this vaccine. 3 years later, on May 1st, 2024, the Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government put out their final report on the censorship industrial complex. It revealed internal Facebook emails talking about how CCDH's disinformation dozen report was both flawed and yet still being repeatedly cited by those who were alleging that Facebook was contributing significantly to vaccine hesitancy, which Imran Ahmed is guilty of doing. What's really amazing here is that even though the U.S. government published their final report showing these internal emails of Facebook debating and saying that the information in the CCDH's report is flawed and that a lot of these posts are benign and should not be pulled down, as well as the coercion between the Biden administration and these social media platforms to regulate speech, which is a violation of Americans' First Amendment rights, this asshole doubles down and puts this in the lawsuit as if it's something to be proud of, even though the data is severely flawed and skewed to push this vaccine agenda that harmed so many people. This CCDH report, despite being filled with inaccuracies, defamatory statements, as well as disinformation, is still up on the CCDH website for people to download. This report actively named and shamed 12 people and recommended banning groups so people couldn't get together to talk about their experiences. One of the examples that they gave in this report as it being anti-vax and misinformation is this one by Sayer G, where he posted something that said, "I refuse to participate in a medical conspiracy that says wearing a mask is healthy and we all pretend healthy people are ill and can make us all sick." Think about how many people got deplatformed, demonetized, ostracized from the online space just because they either expressed questions or felt differently or, wanted to have a dialogue over their experience. Now that we know scientifically that masks really don't make a difference, this just looks stupid. And this guy got canceled over it. CCDH, headed up by Imran Ahmed, was relentless going after these people. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. got it the worst, and I suspect it was because he was running for president. So what way to mess up the campaign than to get him completely deplatformed and shutting his voice down? And this is what makes me so angry, is that Harry and Meghan were doing the exact same thing. Those reports that Christopher Bouzy put together, the coordinated media, Netflix, and Smelly Hall from BuzzFeed News, who was colluding with Christopher Bouzy, a bot sentinel, and played a role in getting YouTube to de-rank channels like mine from search results and recommendations, hurting my ability to earn. What's so infuriating to me and disgusting is that Harry and Meghan are millionaires. And they felt entitled to take away someone's voice during a time where people were struggling, as well as people's right to earn a living. And the abuse that we all took And what makes me so angry is that all of it was done intentionally. All the lies that was put out there was designed to get us to react and then to come after us in order to turn around and say, you see, there's a lot of hate online. We really need to put guardrails and take away more of their rights because, they can't handle thinking on their own. We have every right to be angry about this. And just like Imran Ahmed isolating 12 accounts, Christopher Bouzy did the very same thing.
The members of this committee have seen the same tactics from social media executives time and time again. You have correctly determined, as have legislators in the UK, Australia, Germany, and other allied nations, that social media companies cannot self-regulate and that we need new legislation. There is no silver bullet, that's right. Section 230 shows the limitations to a single solution based on one core principle. It did not predict nor deal with the harms we are now seeing emanating from social media. There will need to be a range of approaches to transparency and accountability to nudge social media into a place that balances dialogue, privacy, safety, and prosperity. The bills being considered today would collectively represent a big step forward to protecting children, families, society, and our democracies. The Kids Act would put real protections in place for our children. Transparency is an essential tool in countering online hate and lies. The Social Media Data Act, therefore, would give independent researchers the access needed to detect dangerous trends. Whistleblowers have leaked internal documents illuminating wrongdoing by big tech, providing new urgency to the reform debate. But whistleblowing is still profoundly risky for the whistleblower, which is why the incentives and protections provided by the FTC Whistleblower Act are critical. Social media apps trick users very often into giving up their personal data, their thoughts, their fears, their likes, their dislikes, which they then sell to advertisers. Big tech's big data is designed to exploit people, not to serve them better. The Detour Act puts a stop to that destructive spiral. Look, there are also two much-needed bills to address the growing threat of hostile foreign actors who revel in the divisions that social media creates and exacerbates in democratic societies. In approving these bills, the committee would take a huge step forwards towards better regulation and give us hope that an internet that brings out the best in people is possible. Thank you very much.
I want to know why it's allowed to have people from different countries come to the United States and tell us what type of laws we need to put in place, and then acting as if you're above the law, thinking that you can take other people's rights away, and then having lawyers that would defend it. Which now brings me to Imran's legal representation. So who is the law firm representing this POS? So we have two law firms representing this guy. One law firm is sitting at the Satan building. That should tell you enough about what we're dealing with. Now, the other one is Kaplan Martin, with the partner, Roberta Kaplan, representing. As you can see, this is one expensive legal team. So the big question is, in the event that this guy doesn't win, who is going to be paying for all of this? Is it going to be from the CCDH and those taxpayer donations, or is it going to be some dark money donor like George Soros? Inquiring minds want to know. But how peculiar Imran chose Roberta Kaplan. Hopefully, this lawyer's name rings a bell. She's the lawyer that represented Jean Carroll in that bogus rape case against Donald Trump and won. She was also one of the founders of the whole Time's Up movement. In case people forgot, Time's Up was Hollywood's flashy, virtue-signaling response to the Me.2 reckoning. You know, how Meghan's all about that in 2018 with the royals. A 2018 initiative launched by hundreds of A-list celebrities. Remember Reese Witherspoon, Shonda Rhimes, Natalie Portman? Remember when woke Hollywood showed up in black dresses at the Golden Globes wearing their Time's Up pins, and they set up a legal defense fund that raised over $20 million to supposedly fight workplace sexual harassment everywhere from studios to farms? In reality, it was peak elite hypocrisy. A club of wealthy, powerful women and their enablers patting themselves on the back while cozying up to the very power structures they claimed to challenge. Critics called it for what it was. Celebrities too focused on Hollywood glamour, they lacked diversity in leadership, and exploited victim stories for inspirational award season branding without forcing real industry change. I mean, how much did Meghan really do here? The fatal blow came in 2021 when leaders like the CEO, Tina Chen, and board chair, Roberta Kaplan, were exposed for secretly advising Andrew Cuomo's team on discrediting his sexual harassment accusers. Yeah, you heard that correctly. While publicly posturing as champions of survivors. I wonder, did she also do that with Amber Heard? For those that don't know, she was the lawyer that hired Bot Sentinel. Yes, Christopher Bouzy's Bot Sentinel. She commissioned him to conjure up one of his special Fugazi reports. You know, one of those Meghan Markle specials focused on those single-purpose hate accounts. And this report was supposed to sell the court that Johnny Depp had all of these bots going after Amber Heard and what a victim she was as a result of the online hate. I mean, isn't it just a small world that Roberta Kaplan hired Christopher Bouzy to generate a Fugazi report? Same type of report that Christopher Bouzy generated for reputational warfare against us. And then you have Imran Ahmed, who seems to be like the UK version of Christopher Bouzy and also enjoys putting together these Fugazi reports, then to be picked up by the media to put pressure on the social media companies to get people canceled. What are the odds? Actually, the odds are really good because they're all part of the same damn network. If you made it this far, my question to you is, are you getting it yet? If so, then help the kid out and hit that like button, as well as double check to make sure that you're still subscribed because tomorrow I will be dropping the final installment to this little mini series. So you don't want to miss it. Definitely leave your thoughts below. As always, I will be back with more content, but until then, please be safe and I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Such a fraud.